Trauma Uncensored.
Trauma Uncensored.
Trauma Uncensored.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Trauma Uncensored. This is part of our 5-episode launch, so thank you for listening. Ideally, you're listening to this on the first week that it came out, but if this is like a year after, welcome to the show. I'm going to have Brooke here, who is our main host, talk a little bit about the context that has brought us here. If you want the full story, highly recommend you go back to episode 1 and check out the crash. That kind of is the catalyst for everything that we're going to talk about going forward. These first 5 episodes, I'm not exactly sure what order we're going to release them in, but regardless, they're kind of showing a little bit of all of the different kinds of episodes that you can look forward to in the future. And with that, Brooke, if you want to say hello and a little bit of context before we're here. Thanks everybody for listening. Hi Brooke, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Living the dream. I'm actually traveling today.
I know. Where are you headed?
I'm going to Austin.
Austin.
We're doing some filming for a client, so
that sounds like fun.
Go.
I will not be traveling today.
Good tacos.
Yeah. Oh, good tacos. It's been a while since I've been to Austin, but you have one for me. Hi, everybody. I am Brooke. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for sitting through and with us as we talk about trauma and we talk about grief and loss and the journeys that people travel, the roads that people travel. My journey started actually before September 15th of 2016, but the primary turning point of my life would be on September 15th of 2016 when a distracted driver killed our 9-year-old son, Logan. There were 4 of us in the car that day. All of the rest of us were severely injured. The man who killed Logan was not. He barely left with a scratch on him, but this would all lead to a criminal case in April and June of 2023, where Gregory Andreotis was convicted of vehicular homicide and 3 counts of reckless driving with serious bodily injury and is currently serving 30 years in prison for his actions because of a phone. Because of a phone, which kind of brings us to the topic today, where in other episodes, in the episode labeled The Crash, we go into the details of everything that happened the day of September 15th, 2016. But we've also talked about kind of the aftermath from an emotional standpoint and a psychological standpoint, like, you know, with your mentality and we'll get way more into detail with those as episodes come. But today we wanted to talk a little bit about the physical side of things that people might not think about and approach this with the statistical brain. So we have some stats to just kind of open the episode up with that I just got in an email. So, you know, I kind of like that. I just got them from you about 10 minutes ago to read them. I haven't fully read them out loud just to kind of get the actual reaction to some of these stats, because it is mind-boggling to think how this happens to this day still. And we kind of alluded this to in our last episode, where it was like, people know you're not supposed to be doing this. And we're not talking about just texting and driving. We're talking about distracted driving. We're talking about, you know, trying to eat while you're driving, or looking over to your passenger and not really paying attention to the road, particularly in like high speed highways, but really anywhere, because of the reaction times. And we kind of broke down a little bit about how, you know, you travel a football field in 2.5 seconds when you're going 80 miles an hour. So things like that. But this is going to be a different approach, more on like the physical aftermath, where someone might come up to you today, and this is a good place to start. Someone might come up to you today and go, "Oh, yeah, I mean, that's emotionally hard, but at least you're physically fine now." Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What do you have to say to that? What do you have to say to that?
Well, here's what I have to say to that. So, and I'll talk a lot more about this too, about the whole idea of the body keeping the score. In further episodes, especially the fact that, you know, trauma is carried in the body and it will continue to carry in the body until you do the work to start to release it. Stress is a huge component of that, but stress and, you know, any sort of trigger for me will set my back on fire. I just in about the last year and a half, I've started to show signs of back issues because of the crash, primarily on the side that affected me the most, where I had the broken bones the worst, the punctured lung, which, you know, I found I was slowly suffocating with my own blood while we were on the scene because, I couldn't feel anything at the time. There's something to be said too about the whole fight or flight adrenaline, pushing through, a broken body and slowly suffocating. And I felt nothing, nothing until a certain point later on that day when my body knew it was okay to relax. If it could have been okay to relax that day, but
okay to relax?
it was actually, at the time of the crash, I thought Jordan was dead, and they would not tell me. He was slumped over the driving wheel. He was foaming at the mouth. He was absolutely unresponsive. And at the scene, they wouldn't tell me anything. They wouldn't let me near him. They wouldn't tell me anything about, if he was okay, if he was alive. They wouldn't even tell me that. And when I was sitting in the ER finally 2 or 3 hours later, I was sitting in my stretcher in the hallway while they were getting ready to put me into an ER room. And they had wheeled Jordan in front of me, and I heard his voice. They were sending him off to I think a CT scan or an MRI. And I heard his voice. And in that moment, I knew he was okay. And in that moment, the whole floodgate, the waters just opened up. And all of a sudden, this immeasurable amount of pain I could feel. So it was very interesting to me, that first real experience of, fight or flight and the adrenaline. It's true what they say. Your body literally goes into that survival mode. And, I was just running on adrenaline, and it kept me from feeling any pain whatsoever until that moment. But over the past year, coupled with stress, I've started to notice that my lower back on the left side has been giving me lots of fits, and I do regular dry needling now, which helps. But I ended up in the ER recently, and it was a morning where I woke up, I was feeling incredibly sore on my left side, and it was a morning where I had started to go to Danielle to see, to my trainer.
Hi, Danielle.
Hey, Danielle. She just got back from the Bahamas too. I'm so jealous. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I'd started with her, and I was really sore, and we decided in that moment we weren't going to train. And I actually had a ketamine session after, and I started there, and I told my ketamine doctor that, I was bothered, and she started to mention the idea of maybe like a kidney stone. And I got 15 minutes into my ketamine session, and I was telling them I've got to go to the hospital, and Dr. Rome's like, she's got to go. So I went ambulatory to the hospital and was in the ER and an excruciating amount of pain. I didn't end up with the kidney stone, but I tell you what, I have a feeling I know what that feels like. They tried to give me acetaminophen through a drip, and I laughed at them, and I was like, that is going to do nothing for me. But even, they sent me home. They did a CT scan. They were like, we can't find anything. There's nothing that we can find. And the thing is about, I was actually talking to Jordan about this morning. It's weird that, it took, you would think with an injury, that it would come immediately. But it has taken it took 7 years for that to start flaring up in my lower back. And I notice it now more in times of stress or trauma triggers. And so what's very interesting about that situation is that I had something happen leading up to that morning that I went to the ER. Especially the night before, there was just like this profound experience that was similar to the crash. And I feel like my body the next morning just kind of let go. So here I am in extreme pain, and I go to the ER, and they find, absolutely nothing. So I think a mix between the injury that's already there, but I also had been under so much stress that the moment that my body was like, okay, we're no longer in fight or flight mode, and it relaxed, then the pain set in. And it did, it kicked in. So there's such a mixture between, I'm to the point now where, I used to be an avid runner. I think I've mentioned this before. I used to sprint up hills to try and distract myself. I used to be an avid runner, cyclist. I have a rowing machine in my bedroom that I actually haven't touched since I started having back issues. And it's continued to, like, it flares up in these spaces that I know I'm under stress or I feel triggers. Sometimes I don't actually recognize it immediately. It's in the hindsight, but the more it happens, the more I'm like, oh, this is going on in my life, or this is going on, or this is a trigger. In fact, I went to Danielle this morning and I told her that for moving forward, for the time being, I'm going to have to take it very easily on doing any sort of like real intensive lower body work, because I just don't think, especially under times of stress, that I can handle it. I could go to her and be just fine and do, lower body exercises all day long for weeks, as long as things are kind of slow and moving and I'm feeling all right, or there's nothing, triggering happening. But I'm telling you what, the moment that something like that happens, it's like, boom. So it's probably between the injury and the stress, slash trauma, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it could be that your body just learned that that's how it deals with pain going forward.
And
just like,
that's exactly what my PT, who does the dry needling, that's exactly what she says. Our brains latch on, and that is our danger signal. That is our danger warning. But I also have found over time that I walk around in a perpetual state of clench. Like I have to wear night guards now because my teeth are gonna all fall out if I don't take measure to, and you'll see me shift every once in a while too in my seat, and that's because my back's bothering me. But it's like my lower body, where Jordan carries all of his up in his shoulders, I carry all of mine apparently in like my lower hip and pelvic region. And that one spot in my back, every time it flares, I'm like, I know what's going on.
That's wild.
I gotta relax. Find ways to relax, right? Go take a walk, or get into my plants, or get into, the baking business that I have, or just something that brings me a healthy distraction to bring down my nervous system.
That checks out entirely.
Oh, so much more to talk about.
Yeah, we can dig into some. We could bring your physical therapist and just talk about.
We could, that.
Yeah.
Well, and what's great too is, Dr. Rome and I have spent many conversations, my ketamine doctor. We've spent many conversations talking about how the body keeps the score. And, that is something that I've heard, we dove into when I was at Milestones, which is that residential trauma program that both Jordan and I have spent time in. And they talk about it there. So they do trauma informed yoga at Milestones and breath works. And they do martial arts, and all of these things to help regulate the system, because you regulate the system and your body will calm down. But as I've gone on through all of this, you are absolutely right that the body learns that pain. And Chrissy, the gal who does my dry needling, my PT, she is constantly telling me that, that is the way, the brain at some point has latched on to the idea that it can get my attention right there. Yeah. Jordan gets his shoulders act up, and he knows he needs to take care of it. He needs to, find a way to regulate. My back does the same thing. But it is part injury, I believe, but you'll never be able to see it on anything because it's, I don't know if it's nervous system. I don't know if it's muscular. I don't know what happened in that injury, on the day of the crash, but that, and then you add all the layers of stress and trauma on top, and it's just a perfect storm of ouchness.
I mean, it's bananas to think that like we weren't bred for this. You know what I'm saying? Like when people talk about like evolution and stuff, we're evolved to want to take care of our kids, or we've evolved to want to provide for a family. Like there's like some evolution that you can scientifically like go back and show all these things, but there's no part of the human race that's evolved for situations where you get hit at 80 miles an hour by an object and survive. You know what I'm saying? Like, and other times up till about 40 years ago, 25 years ago, you would die. At all, you would have died, and he would have died. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so we're finding all these like new ways that the body responds to trauma that we are able to sustain now because of the technology that's there for safety, right? But it's just so new like it doesn't happen. I alluded to Formula One last time. Like when those guys crashed, they can calculate the G forces of impact.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like someone crashes and it's like he hit the wall at 55 G's, which is 55 times his own weight against the wall. Like there was no way that 300, not even 40 years ago, someone could survive that. You know what I mean?
No,
like,
right.
And so then like all this stuff that's being discovered and that you're experiencing is still pretty cutting edge from a standpoint of like our human race, because it's like you were hit and you went from 0 to 41 miles an hour in a tenth of a second, which is about the time it takes you to blink on like a normal blink.
Yep.
0 to 41.
Well, yeah.
Your body's not designed to like
no,
go through
it's
that.
not. But here's also the thing. It's not just the physicality of all of that. It's also the psychological component. So animals in nature, whenever they, whenever they're threatened, right? Do you know what they do? They lay down and they pretend that they're dead. And when the threat has passed, they shake it off. They're able to shake off and regulate their nervous system so that trauma doesn't get stuck in their body. But I went from this crash straight into the hospital, and there were no services to sit down and talk to me about any of that, or to help me regulate, or to help me even process what happened. I didn't process that crash until I was at Milestones in 2022. Almost 7 years later, almost to the day that I was at Milestones, and I finally had a team that helped me start processing what had happened the day of the crash and move it from the place where it's not supposed to be in the brain to the place where it's supposed to be. And I can safely say that because of the work that I've done around that, at this point, I can talk about the crash. I can talk about Logan on the day of the crash. I can talk about these experiences, and my body doesn't dysregulate. Where before, when we were, running our nonprofit Living for Logan, and I was in front of legislation and I was in front of the media all of the time talking about this day over and over and over again, it was constantly, I didn't know this at the time, but my body was constantly reliving that day over and over. And it just built and built and built. And the body and the mind can only sustain so much for so long. And it literally broke me. I mean, it sent me into, at the beginning of 2020, I went into that, coupled with something that happened with the trial at the time, sent me into a place of complete dissociation and, suicidality and all of these things. And that's why I'm sitting here now, because nobody's talking about this stuff. Like, what would have happened if I went into the hospital, or if there was someone on the scene that day? Now, of course, I'm in shock, right? So how much of it would I have been able to have processed? But if there was some way, even on the scene or even immediately at the hospital, that someone would have come to me and helped me to try to process that in that time.
Yeah. Well, a professional that would know how to try to handle that. Yeah.
Exactly. Then my life could have been, the past 9 years could have been completely different. Now, I will say that I am a very firm believer that things happen in the time and the way that they're supposed to. So it wasn't supposed to happen then. I was supposed to lead to this and this and this and this, to get where I'm sitting here today. But I can try and help change that for other people. When I was in the ER a few days ago, it's been, I guess, over a week now. The doctor, he came in after the CT scan and he was completely perplexed. He was like, "There's nothing on your CT scan." Everybody thought that I had a kidney stone. Dr. Rome sent me to the hospital thinking I had a kidney stone. And there was absolutely nothing on that CT scan. And I had gone into ketamine that morning talking to Dr. Rome about how I felt like this was my body responding to the stress I was under. But it just got gradually worse and worse and worse. And my mom was sitting in the ER with me that whole day. Thank God she had driven down from Indiana the day before, and because she's actually moving in a few weeks. I'm so excited, but moving down here. But she was, it's the little things, really. I'm just so excited. My mom's moving down. She's going to be close. It's going to be great. Cause I'll never go back to Indiana, no offense to the Hoosiers and whatever, but that's just not, it's just not my place. But she told me in the aftermath, and it's kind of a blur to me, but she told me how much I was cussing the entire time. She said it had to have hurt because of what was coming out of your mouth. And I was like, it was extremely painful. And no, the acetaminophen. Well, how's that? I can't pronounce this. The acetamin. The Tylenol drip.
Yes, I was going to say it's okay.
Clearly, I'm still recovering.
Yeah.
But I mean, that wouldn't even touch it. They had to give me something much stronger, and they hit me with it twice, and then gave me muscle relaxers, and I was able to calm down.
And then that's also how someone can, when you see someone who's addicted to sort of pain medication and stuff like that, these are all, we're just dancing and talking about all the different topics that we are going to be covering as we move forward. But even just like talking about statistics behind like, okay, people who end up in your situation in the hospital for all whatever blunt force trauma of any kind. Yours was particularly in a car crash. Like what statistically happens to people like you, right?
Absolutely.
How many of them end up divorced? How many end up losing their life to suicide? How many of them end up addicted to drugs? And we'll discover how it is so difficult for people to even end up healthy, or not even healthy, if you call it that, not dead.
Right. Right. Well, and it's interesting you said that, especially about the drugs. I've had, and I'll tell this story later, I won't do it now, but I've had people tell me it's a wonder that I didn't get addicted to opiates after what happened to me in the hospital. Well, because of how the doctor treated me. I mean, not just in the hospital, but post hospital.
Mm-hmm. It can be such a slippery slope, and not just to deal with the physical pain, but also with the mental pain. And so that's kind of what we're here to talk about as a podcast. Again, this is just kind of all of these 5 episodes are just kind of like a 30,000 foot view of all of the different directions that this has gone for you in the last 9 years, but it also goes for people in general. Like we're not here to say, oh, woe is me, I am Brooke. No. We're here to say, look, there are so many people today that are going through this, that this is going to happen to, and tomorrow they will be like I was on September 16th, 2016, right? The day after, and so on and so forth. And so hopefully this reaches their friends and those people as well, to help them understand, hey, it's going to be a different life now. It's going to be as okay as it can be. And we are here to help you carry this weight and understand
that's exactly it.
How this is going to work.
There is no part of me that feels woe is me. That's not why I'm on here. I'm not on here to get people's sympathy. I'm on here to hopefully create change and help people so they don't go through. I mean, I've been through, like I've mentioned before, into the deepest, darkest recesses of hell, and I have clawed, scratched, climbed my way out, mostly on my own accord, because I wasn't, I just never gave up. I didn't want to give up. But it doesn't have to be like that for people. It doesn't have to, my experience doesn't have to be that way for people at all. And until us as a society, as a world, until we're all talking about it and we're actually doing something about it, people are going to continue to go through what I went through. And I don't wish that upon anyone at all.
So on that note, let's get into some of these stats that we got right before oh man. These are wild. I just skimmed some of this. So, okay. So first of all, this is coming from a study, and we can get, some of this, we can share some of these onto the link so people can go find them. Blanco et al. 2023. This was a study done. And this is just an excerpt from it. I will try to find the full study, and we'll get all these information down so people can click on them and go read them themselves as well.
And I do actually want to thank Jennifer Smith, who runs stopdistractions.org. We've worked very closely with her for very many years, and she actually compiled everything for us that we've got today and will use carrying forward.
Yeah, and probably more. I mean, what a sweet person to get. And she turned around and got us, like, we just asked for like some brief stuff, and she went to work and got us a bunch of information.
So we'll thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah, you rock. And we'll post also her links to her, how to reach her as well below in the description and the show notes. So check those out. But this is just an excerpt. So historically, distracted driving crashes have been more difficult to quantify than drunk driving because unlike BAC, which is blood alcohol content, I just learned, that distraction on driving distracted cannot yet be tested for objectively post-crash. Fair enough. Yep. So, however, Blinko developed and implemented a methodology to estimate both, one, underreporting of cases involving distraction, and two, the shares of crashes, fatalities, and injuries caused by distraction. And here is the key stat. HTSA applies the results of Blinko to the 2021 FARS data to estimate fatalities in 2021 due to distracted driving. They estimate that 28.9% of all crashes and injuries of all severities are due to distraction. 28.9. That's a third, essentially. Mm-hmm. A third of all crashes are due to distraction. Mm-hmm. Based on this estimate, the agency estimates that distracted driving caused 12,405 fatalities in 2021. This represents a social safety cost of approximately $158 billion, with a B, billion dollars, an economic estimate of the loss of life. Wow. 7% of cases of distraction also involve some sort of form of impairment, which we also talked about before. Just because 12,000 people died in 2021, that's just a fraction of, how many people ended up permanently impaired. Mm-hmm. In turn, it is appropriate to assume that there is at least some degree of overlap among drunk driving and distracted driving fatalities, which checks out because if you're drunk, you're more likely to get on your phone because you're not thinking clearly. Idiot. Thus, the combined safety problem associated with yes.
No apologies.
Hey, I'm not going to apologize for someone driving drunk. I'm sorry. The combined safety problem associated with drunk driving and distracted driving is likely to be somewhat smaller than the sum of the individual estimates above. So let's just take those numbers again. 28.9% of all crashes are due to distraction, is what this found. 12,400 fatalities in 2021, mm-hmm. which is crazy.
Yep.
What is that per day? Let me make that math.
Math.
That is crazy to think about. 12,365 days. The math ends up being about 33 or 34 per day on average in 2021.
And that's the interesting thing is when we were working in 2017, starting in 2017, with Living for Logan, the nonprofit, we were saying 9 people a day. The numbers were 9. Oh, for sure. The numbers that we were using in our talks and our whatever was, in the media in front of legislation was 9 people a day. And that was starting, well, you know what, let's say it was more 2018 because we got in front of legislation the first time in 2018 and started to get in front of the media then. So
that's an average of
so that's 3 years
fatality per 42 minutes is what that comes down to.
That's crazy.
So
actually, it's really not. I mean, everybody who's listening to this knows, they get on the road and it's everywhere. I mean, they see people everywhere. So just for the record, when we hit 42 minutes, someone statistically has died because someone was driving distracted, not mm-hmm. drunk, not just speeding, just specifically someone distracted. Mm-hmm. But they're on their phone, eating, doing whatever, doing their makeup. So someone died is going to die within that amount of time. Mm-hmm. We've done 5 episodes. I was going to say we've done 5 episodes.
Mm-hmm. Have died. Mm-hmm. That is so insane. Mm. So insane. And I mean, that's just one set of stats that we just got. And again, we'll share these so you guys can go look them up. In fact, we can probably look them up for most recently. Here's another one really quick, real fast. So drunk driving was the second biggest cause after distraction. Oh, take that in one more time. Let me just say that one more time. Drunk driving was the second biggest cause of death after distraction. Oh my gosh. Alcohol-involved crashes resulted in 14,219 fatalities, 497,000 non-fatal injuries, and 68 billion in economic cost in 2019.
And that's the thing. We can't, because of how things are run currently, we can't even prove the crashes that are caused by distraction. And I mean, I don't think there's ever going to be a time where we're going to be able to fully parse out all of them. I mean, because there are so many distractions. My primary focus is obviously going to be cellular phone use. I don't know where that came from. Phone use. But it's, the eating the sandwich, or it's the even looking in the rear view mirror at your kids. When we were living in Florida, Jordan and I were driving separately, but we had gone to the mall. We'd taken the kids to the mall to eat. And I remember I was driving around the outskirt drive of the mall, and I looked back. The kids were fighting or doing something, and I looked back in my rearview mirror for a second to yell at them. And the car in front of me had just come to a stop, and I didn't see it, and there was a fender bender. I mean, so it's not just the phone, but it's watching movies, it's eating, it's tending to your children, it's
arguing.
It is arguing. I know.
I've argued with my wife or with just a person on the phone. Like, how can you just look over to see how they're reacting?
Yeah.
And I mean, again, we cover this in one of the episodes. If you're driving 80 miles an hour, it takes you 2.56 seconds to cover a football field of distance. So you're talking to someone 1,000 to 1,000. I just looked over at you. I went an entire football field and didn't know what happened.
Yep.
You couldn't tell me what I just saw on the road because I was looking at you for 2.5 seconds. I just looked at you. That is insane. This is the last that I'll share as far as this when it comes to phone stuff, specifically because you mentioned phone use. 1 in 3 crashes occur within 1 minute of a driver using their phone. 1 in 3. So of the 29%, 1 of 3 of those crashes, the person had been on their phone for less than a minute. Within a minute of using their phone, within the minute of using it. So it's towards the beginning.
And that's the thing, when we've come across people who are, I needed to change my GPS. Okay, well, you can pull over, or you can hey Siri to pull it up. I mean, Jordan and I use Siri in the car.
Yeah.
I mean, you're never going to change that. And there is a time and a place if I'm driving back to Indiana, as I've done recently, and I need to find a rest stop, if I say the word SIRI, my phone's going to go off, even though it's on Do Not Disturb. So I'm not going to say it. Yeah.
They're listening.
I know they're always listening. But I'll ask where the nearest rest stop is, or if something is, a lot of times I will hear a message as it comes across, but I will not answer it unless it's absolutely necessary. And I'll wait until I get home to answer it, but my phone stays in my side compartment, the side console, every time I plug it in. So it's charging, I throw it in there, and it does not come out until I get where I'm going.
So it was funny because when I first met you, Danielle was the one that introduced us. Thanks, Danielle. And
hey, Danielle, thank you.
And when she texted me, I was driving. And then there was traffic. I was at a stoplight, and I kind of skimmed it because I knew it was going to turn green. Because I already didn't like driving distracted in general. But what I did do is I would tell Siri and dictate back. So your message came through, and I was skimming it at the red line. I was I don't know what exactly. So I just put it up, and then you guys kept texting that group chat, and I was telling Siri what to say to you. And I even during the text message, without knowing what the context was for you and Danielle talking to me, I even said, "Hey, I don't like driving distracted." But I'm using Siri right now. Sorry for any typos. I'll get to this when I park. I said that to you.
You did.
Not knowing.
Yep, I know.
Who you were or the context of our meeting.
Because I was telling Danielle, I was he has no idea. And he says this, and I'm that's got to be a sign. That's got to be a sign of some sort, right? That
I think Danielle later said, "Hey, don't text and drive during this," or something. She must have mentioned something afterwards, and I was "Oh, thank God I said that," because I was already but it's just interesting how it doesn't take that long, and again, so now we kind of can move into some of these things where people might not think about, and again, we'll go more into details of all these stats, but then also this aspect of things that I wanted to ask you about as far as like dealing with insurance. We kind of alluded this to that first episode, I think, a little bit, but for example, what have you learned from a standpoint of preparing for the worst, I guess, after this? Because most people, the reality, and I learned this in the movie The Big Short when they were talking about how the housing market crashed, but there's a quote from that movie that I always love, and the guy says people hate thinking about bad things happening, and so therefore they like put their head down and pretend it won't ever happen to them, and so they don't prepare for it because they're too scared of facing even the thought of something bad happening. And in your case, it was like losing your son, not just getting hit by a car, just in general. Like, people don't think about these kinds of things, or going to the hospital, or these bills, or funeral costs, because it's just so hard to think about that they'd rather just I'm not going to think about that until it fucking happens, and then it's like, oh, I should have thought about that, right? As morbid as it seems, I thought about that. And I want to hear your thoughts on this, because I have some thoughts too from some other experience, but I just wanted to pick your brain first and see what
there's so many to list. So Jordan and I, when Logan was born, Jordan and I took out life insurance. So we, did have as a just in case, right? So that we were in our mid 20s. So, well, I guess closer to the end of our 20s, but we didn't have anything until then, even that we'd been married for a while. But once Logan came around, we decided it was time to secure it in some way as a just in case. But what's even more interesting is while I was at grad school at Iowa State, we decided, I don't remember why, but we decided to take a rider out on Logan. Someone had told us, I think it was the people who we got our own insurance from, someone had told us that you get a rider, and that at a certain point in his life, it will mature enough that he can take it out and use it for whatever he wants. So we put a little bit of money in, and by the time he turned 9, that had grown to $35,000. And when he died, we received a check for around $35,000. So we got insurance on Logan, not ever thinking we would actually use it for death. We got insurance on Logan because we were looking at it as an investment for his future.
Yeah.
However, that unfortunately did not go the way we had anticipated. So it is actually, I very do strongly believe in doing something like that for your children. It's not something people want to talk about, because it puts that into, out into the ether that, oh, if I put a life insurance policy on my child, they could die. Well, guess what? You don't put a life insurance policy on your child and they could still die too.
Yeah.
This gave us the ability. Because remember, I was in the hospital for 9 days. Jordan was in there for, I think, three or four. And Mallory was in there for 5. The airlift for Jordan and Mallory alone, I can't remember. So it's been so long, and I haven't gone back and looked specifically at if it was for both of them or each. But I know for at least one of them, that air flight was $50,000.
Just to get them to the hospital.
Just to airlift them to the hospital. And again, I can't remember. Jordan, I'm sure, would remember. And I'd have to go back and look at all the files, which I won't do. But just that. But think about it. I was in the hospital for 9 days. And Andriotis had the most basic driver's insurance policy anybody could have in the state of Florida, which gave us a whole $10,000.
Which doesn't even cover a funeral.
No.
Or barely. It's a basic hole in the ground funeral.
No. Do you know how much it costs to order a death certificate? It's here. Yeah. I'm so sorry for your loss. Now I'm going to give you a bill for $400,000. No, I
Yeah.
mean, obviously not that much, but
$5
it's
million.
not
Yeah.
cheap. Those aren't cheap
Yeah.
either.
No.
But I mean, we had outside therapies once we left, not to mention the counseling that isn't covered by insurance, not to mention all the other costs, so that.
It, it's insane. So, okay, can I share some thoughts on this too?
Yeah.
So first of all, I used to work for Primerica, full disclosure. I don't work there anymore, so I should disclose that. But we did life insurance and we did term insurance, which is similar to what you got, but which we can talk about what kind of insurance to get later on. It's not a sales pitch. It's just a philosophy of life. But anyway, so one of the hardest times, or it's hard to be in that industry sometimes because you're basically talking to people of like, what happens if you die? Mm-hmm. Like you're asking them that question. What? Not even emotionally. We're talking about from a practical standpoint. Let's just use you guys as an example. You and Jordan, right? You die. Where does he get finance from? And so then most families are like, well, and so then that's how you calculate how much insurance you need is based on like the income and right. What would happen? Okay, now we have to go into childcare because nobody's here taking care of the kid, whatever. All that stuff is already dark. And then you have to go and go, by the way, we do have a thing called a child rider, and that is a thing that most insurance policies can add. Most of them should be pretty cheap to add. Again, if you have questions, we'll probably cover this. We can cover this if people want in a much more detailed episode later. But it's low cost for even $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to we're talking like $5 a month or something like that. Maybe more. Don't quote me on that. Again, we can go into those details later. But anyway, my point was when you would bring that up to the family, the look on their face as if you had just punched them, like
I believe it.
It's like we wouldn't sell this product if it didn't happen.
Right.
Right. And then sometimes they would kind of like push back and sometimes get a little agitated with you. And they're like, no, why would you even say that? And it's like, let me tell you a story because this happens. There's people, and I don't even have to give you a real story because there's people like this all over where they didn't have the child rider that you had for Logan, where they come up and there's a hospital bill for the death certificate, the funeral, all this stuff to, the CPR that they were trying to give them. You have to pay for that, right? Especially if your insurance doesn't cover some of that, but you for sure have to pay for the funeral. Do you have the average family? Do you have $10,000 just laying around? No. You know what will likely happen is you have to probably take a loan out.
Right.
And so then you take a loan out, and then not only did you just lose a person in your life, but then for the next 10 years, 5 years, 2 years,
be reminded of it.
You're writing
every
a check.
Time you're paying it. Mm-hmm.
You're writing a check, or there's a direct deposit coming out of your bank account, reminding you of what happened.
Right.
That's not a sales tactic. That's just there are people who have that experience right now, and for $5,
I know
that's a coffee.
I know.
You could prevent that. Just little things like that, where it's like, man, you gotta be willing to prepare for the worst, and that's part of the way of healing and part of the way of growing and being able to carry something that heavy through is sometimes prepping for it ahead of time, right? But when before Rio was born, my wife and I sat down. We said, hey, we got to sit down and talk about what are some of the things that could go wrong, and like we talked about what happened if we lose the baby, what if we miscarry, what if she dies of complications at birth. And one of them was, what happens if she doesn't die, but like ends up in the NICU? Like, what do we do? And we like visually like talk through like, well, we would do this and here's what we'd want to do. And, so when unfortunately it did happen for us, we didn't speak it into existence. We just had to be statistically one of the people that ended up there. Right. There was some aspect of that we're like, hey, we talked about this. And I know it's irrational because it's emotional, but we got to be practical and we got to be there for her. And that was maybe one of the best things that we could have done, to go through that, was actually trying to like prepare for it ahead of time, because it's
having
impossible.
Those conversations are so difficult. It's kind of like what I mentioned in another episode, that it has felt like people don't want to be a part of our lives anymore because we're contagious. It's like if you talk to us, then we're going to rub something off on you and it's going to lead to your own child loss later. Well, that's not the case. But here's the thing. I talk about this a lot. I'm actually very glad that my daughter is coming up in a life where mom and dad are working their asses off to better themselves and therefore better them, but also learn tools needed to live in this world. Because, I grew up with Disney princesses. I'm sure Brie did too. Mallory started to, but that was my entire life. I had a great childhood. I went to college. I lived college like I was supposed to. I got my first job. I was doing all of this stuff. Who was I to think that anything bad was ever going to happen? I went to grad school and I was a professor, and all of these things. I was doing things that made me happy and I worked really hard for. And those people get through in life, right? No. I mean, shit happens to everyone, but nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah. Or more importantly, more accurately, shit can happen to everyone.
There you go.
Because some people,
I will amend my.
Some people do
comment.
go through privilege, and it's like they've never had a car crash, or they've never even and you're like, oh
but,
my god. But they've still been through the hardest thing they've ever been through.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I'm talking about so far. But I'm talking about like real heavy, like what you went through, and that doesn't make it worse or better. I'm not trying to quantify someone's hardship. That's not what I'm saying. But
no, everybody needs to be prepared for whatever.
But even if you're I've never been in a car crash before. I've never even had a family member die of a car crash. Actually, statistically, you're due then. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, right. I'm not trying to speak illy on anybody. I'm just saying the point is, if you're not prepared, if you don't grade yourself, and I know this is part of the uncensored aspect of this podcast, is we have to talk about these things because this is the shit that people don't do, and then it happens, and then they're like, oh, I just never. How many times have you heard someone say, I never thought it would happen to me? You know what I'm saying? Same.
Do you know how many times that came out of my mouth?
Oh my gosh, all the time. And,
there are still times where I question that. I mean, I'm in a better place where I don't wallow in the pity of why me, because I believe that there is a answer to that why me, and I think it is very positive, and I think it is supposed to be that I can help people and help create change. But I spent a lot of time, many years, in the why me. What did I do? What karma did I throw out there that deserved this?
And the question is, why not you?
Exactly. That is exactly it. That needs to be the question that everybody asks themselves. We are not living in a Disney fairy tale. We are living life. And life actually, it's beautiful in so many ways, but it's not perfect. And
it can be dark, and that's okay too.
It can be very dark.
It's life.
It's life. But that's the thing. People aren't taught. I was never taught growing up that things can actually happen. I was never taught that. That's why at 35, when my world fell apart, I had no idea what to fucking do because I'm like, I had all this, I was privileged to a certain point, and I had a great education, and, my mom worked her ass off because my parents were divorced, and she worked her ass off, but we never needed for anything. We were in a good school district, all of these good things. I got into college I wanted to go to. I partied like a college student. Disclaimer, that's not necessarily always the way to do it, but hey, I still went to grad school. I went to grad school. I made it into grad school, and things have just played out. And so how in the hell does someone like me, right, not live in a Disney fantasy world, and but that's the way it is for everyone.
And it's interesting because so when there was a very brief moment, I talk about this sometimes during a traumatic experience with the NICU, when we found out that Ria was really not doing okay, and it was like a really risky situation. I sat there and I said to myself, why me? Why? And it's hard to not think about because I've survived literal heart surgery, open heart surgery. I've survived. My family was going to get murdered, so we had to move to Nebraska. I come from the opposite state where shit has been happening to me my entire life. But at the same time, it still came to the same conclusion when it happened to Ria. I'm like, oh, all of that stuff happened to me so that I could become the father and the man, or the adult is what I mean, the grown up that this little girl needs right now. All of this is so I could figure out how to handle this. And when it was happening, it was calm. was super like not relaxed. That's not the right word, but I was very calm and collected. And it was just such a weird experience because I'm like, oh, okay, like this is going to be okay. Like, regardless of how this turns out, I will survive. And it reminded me of that Matrix quote that we talked about that one time where we were starting the podcast, where it's like everything happened exactly how it should have happened, and it couldn't have happened any other way. And the reason that I know that is because I am still alive. And if I'm here, that means that I was supposed to end up here, whether it's destiny or free will, whatever, all of those decisions, whatever I believed in, I'm here for that. We are here talking about this because of all of that. And so it's okay. And why would not that happen to me? Why would that not happen to me at all? Who do I think I am?
Exactly.
From a privilege standpoint, that it's like, why me? Dude, this could happen to anybody all of the time. You knew that. I knew that. And it happened to us. You went through something extremely horrific. I've gone through other things that are extremely horrific. People listening have gone through things that are extremely horrific. And they all know that those were all things that could have happened to us, right? It's not like you weren't the first person.
But who is actually talking about it and supporting this?
Nobody. I mean, not that we know of. Even if other people are, we are too. And that's the goal, is to help others deal with that. By the way, it's been 50 minutes. So statistically speaking, someone, since we've been talking, since you've been listening to this episode, unless you're listening into it on 2x time, someone has died due to distracted driving since we started recording this in real time. Just to let that sober in and let people understand, please put your fucking phone down or stop.
What do the statistics become if they're listening to this on 2 time?
We'd be at 25 minutes in, so we're still a little bit off, but it'd have to be like an 81-minute.
Do people actually listen to these things at 2 times speed?
Sometimes, yeah. I listen to like at 1.5 sometimes, but still, I mean, how
do you stay focused and with it?
Because sometimes people talk slow enough. I talk too fast for people to listen to me that fast, I think, which is my problem. But anyway, the point is...
That was my question. My question for the day.
Great question. But that's the reality of the situation. And I think it'd be kind of cool going forward if we started each episode with a fun fact. I think you mentioned that. And maybe not a fun fact, but fun is a poor word for a fact, like a distracted driving fact at the beginning, going, hey, did you know this is... And to kind of help people understand, because holy hell, I am blown away by this that you sent me during this episode. That was,
thank you, Jennifer.
That's scary, man.
And it's true. Like, I mean, you just read like 2 statistics out of everything that she. Yeah, but that's the thing too. You know what? I have to stop you on that too. It is perfectly human to, what's. I'll start with this little story. So I remember when I was younger, my mom was in a crash. She was driving home late from the airport. She had been out of town and she was driving home, and a guy fell asleep at the wheel and hit her. And it T-boned her into the side of her side of the car. She was not injured, but she had to crawl out of the sunroof to get out of the car. I hadn't thought about that until actually just a few days ago, because when she was leaving to head back home last week, she was really nervous. Like, she gets a really nervous tummy. And I asked her the other day if she remembered that, or if she was that way because of Logan, because of what happened, or if she remembered being like that before. And she made the comment of something like, I don't remember when it happened, but that couldn't have helped. And then it dawned on me about that crash God, it's been probably 30 years ago that happened, but I have wondered if it's carried forward with her, kind of in those deep recesses. And then Logan, the crash with us happened, and she's a nervous traveler, which, and that's acceptable. But also there are people who have asked me, how are you not scared of driving after all of this? And I had told my mom, it's weird because I have never, even since the crash, it has never bothered me to get behind the wheel. There's some times where I'm like, get me the fuck out of here. And I want to get in my car and I want to drive. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was because Jordan was driving and I wasn't. I don't know if maybe there was just some safety mechanism that has kicked in, but since the first day I could get back on the road.
Like, what about getting on the interstate or being in a traffic jam? Like,
no, I'm much more aware. I am much more aware and very diligent about my surroundings, for sure. But I've never been scared. But all of that to say that, these statistics are fucking scary. The statistics are scary. And there are still going to be people listening to this going, well, you know what? It's never happened to me. It's not going to happen to me. I'm not going to get scared. Ugh. But the statistics are scary. And for people who look at that and they're like, God, I don't really want to get back out there. And this goes not just for this goes for life in general, I believe. That mindset is what holds us from experiencing our true selves and our true joy in life. If we take traumatic experiences and we allow it to have power over ourselves and to dictate how we live our lives, we might as well just crawl into a hole and never come out. I don't let these things scare me. Now, I've had times of trepidation. I used to get nervous traveling on airplanes for a little bit after the crash, but if I were to allow that to keep me at home, I mean, we've been so many places with the girls and seen so many things. And the way I look at it is life's going to life, regardless of how much control I try to put on it. So if I don't get in that car and I'm too scared to get in that car, then I'm missing out on what I'm supposed to be here experiencing.
That is wild to think about. Mm-hmm. Also, you're safer on an airplane. Back to these statistics.
Oh my gosh.
Less people die on airplanes than they do in a car, which is crazy. Crazy to think about.
Go figure why it used to make me nervous, but now it doesn't.
But liberate yourself from the trauma and go live your life. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're going to try to help people do as we continue to have these conversations. And I think that's a good bow to put on, on this episode, whether this is the actual number 5 episode that comes out. It won't matter. People will listen to it in whatever order, but this will conclude the recording of the first 5 launch episodes. And I'm excited for people to listen to these. I'm excited for people to learn what we have to share. And I'm excited to continue to talk about these things for people to learn and maybe help get some clarity on some of the traumas that they've experienced. If you have questions, please submit them to hello@traumauncensored.com, or put the link on that below as well in the show notes. And please reach out if you have questions or suggestions. If you have a story to share, if you want us to dig into a specific kind of aspect of trauma that we could maybe talk about, reach out. Please support us. Make sure you guys follow us on Instagram, TikTok. I believe we're also doing TikTok. And then subscribe to on Apple
YouTube.
Podcasts or Spotify.
YouTube.
Oh, and then YouTube. That's right. We're going to post these up there. So,
but I also do want to follow up just real quick with saying, I am available too. You can reach me at Brooke at traumacensored.com. Can we just start over on that one? All right. Don't reach me at Trauma Censored. Reach me, Brooke at Uncensored.com. I can't, guarantee I'm going to be able to get to everybody. And I just literally put myself out there for things, for lots of emails and contact, but that's okay. I am open if someone needs to talk. I may not be able to answer questions completely, but I may have resources that I can point you to. I'm open. Definitely utilize the hello at traumauncensored.com as well, but know that you're not alone and that there are people that you can talk to, and I'm one of them.
Beautiful. Oh, well said. And with that, goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next week. We'll be coming out with new episodes every Monday. So,
adios.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.